May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable and pleasing in thy sight, O God. Amen. Well, good morning. It's good to be in the sanctuary on Sunday morning. I love coming in here. I thought about filming this last night or yesterday evening, but I felt like Sunday morning was the appropriate time to be here and when I needed to film this and do this, because this is where you belong on Sunday morning. I just wish all of you could be here with me, and I'm just going to picture all of you guys out here with your smiling faces and all that as I preach, but I hope you're all staying safe and healthy and wise during these strange times. So on Friday morning, my wife and I went for a hike out in the mountains on some open trails, and we were smart. We avoided, the 6-foot rule. We avoided interacting with people or getting too close. But one thing I noticed was that as we went on the hike, being extroverted, when we would pass people, we had the distance and all that, but I would say good morning. And I noticed people didn't really want to say good morning back. It was almost like they felt like, hey, we're not supposed to interact. And they maybe, if they said good morning back, I would just go and give them a hug or breathe on them or, something. And so I would say good morning and people were kind of like, oh. And then one curious thing at the end of the hike, we walked past a mom with like 3 kids. They were aged like 8 and 10 and 12. And you could tell the mom had like lectured the kids. Like, we're gonna go for a hike, but if you encounter anyone, you need to stay away, keep your distance. You're not gonna get, you got a sense that she had kind of read them the riot act, if you will. And so as Christina and I walked, we walked on the one side of the path, and the kids were walking on the other. And when they passed us, we're a good 6, 7, 8 feet away, but these kids still like leaned away from us as if we were like had some sort of force field, and they just needed to get an extra little bit away and kind of looked. And it was cute and it was funny, but there was also a part of me that was like, I'm not a monster, right? Like, I'm a human being. We just live in these strange times, and we can still treat each other with civility. But it was just funny and a little weird to have this kid like lean away as he just walked by us. So being a pariah and feeling like a pariah segues into our gospel reading for today, where we have Jesus healing a man born blind. And this man born blind was this social pariah. He was a beggar. He was probably uneducated, and Jesus heals him and opens his eyes. And this is one of my favorite passages in the entire Bible. I wish all of you were here just so you could feel my love for this scripture passage. Because you have Jesus and his disciples, and they're walking along, and they see this man who's born blind, and you can picture them seeing this person who's just differently abled, and maybe it makes them feel weird. And maybe they kind of want to lean away as they walk by this guy. Like, oh, this is strange. It makes me uncomfortable. And so one of them says, hey, Jesus, who sinned that this man was born blind? Was it him, or was his parents that sinned that caused him to be born blind? Now, I just want to unpackage how ridiculous that question is. Because first of all, how could this man have sinned so that he was born blind? Was he somehow sinning prepartum that caused him to be born blind? That whole question doesn't make any sense. And then to say that this was like punishment on his parents somehow, and you see this happen today in certain ways, where parents whose children are born healthy and great almost like pat themselves on the back like we did something right. And parents whose kids are born differently abled and maybe even blind, it's like, ooh, well, they probably did something wrong. And Jesus kind of counters all of that logic in today's reading. And as they ask him this question about this man born blind, Jesus upends their whole assumption and is like, no, this is a beautiful creature loved by God. And so Jesus encounters this man, and he spits on the ground, makes mud, puts it on the man's eyes, and tells him to go wash in a pool. And he goes and washes, and then he's healed, and he can see for the first time in his life. Miracle of miracles. Now, why Jesus spat on the ground to make mud, and put those on his eyes? Why didn't Jesus just kind of wave his hand? I don't know. I don't know all those answers. But I know this is how Jesus did it, and the man is cured. And so he goes around telling people, I was born blind, and this man, Jesus, cured me. And I love that in this passage that people are debating whether or not he's the actual man that was born blind and was cured. Even though he's standing right there saying, no, I was that man. Believe me, it was me. I'm that man, and now I'm cured and I can see. And they're still kind of debating, well, he kind of looks like him, but this is weird, and I don't know if I believe him. Even the whole time, he's like, I have a voice, I have agency, I'm telling you this is me. Listen to him. Listen to me. I am that man born blind, and now I am cured. And it's such a miraculous thing that happens. No one's ever heard of a man born blind being cured. And so it makes Jesus more and more famous and gets him more and more popularity. And so then the religious leaders, the high council, is like, oh, we got to investigate this thing. And so they call the man up to give testimony. But remember, today, if you have a child who's born blind, there's structures in place. We have a system that can offer care, but it's still not ideal or perfect, right? I assume you as the parents would probably have to move to the city that has the school for kids who are blind. Or you either have to do that or you have to send your child away to a school. It's not real convenient and it's not perfect. And it's still, we're in a growing process of taking care of people who are differently abled like that. But I imagine in Jesus' day, there might have just been nothing. There was this guy's born blind, good luck, we don't know what to do with him. And so this man is uneducated. He was probably poorly cared for his whole life, and he ends up a beggar on the street. So he has no education. He probably doesn't smell very good. He spends his days just asking for money on the street to get enough food so he can eat and survive. That's his quality of life. So in terms of social hierarchy and social power, he's near the very, very, very bottom, right? He's way down here. And yet because of his encounter with Jesus, he ends up being called before the high council of religious leaders. So to put that in today's context, here in Oakland, it would be like if he was from a really poor neighborhood with a bad reputation. And if from that neighborhood, he had very poor parents, and he, maybe dropped out of school when he was 10 or 11 years old, lived on the street and is a beggar. He probably hasn't bathed much. He probably doesn't smell very good. And now because of his encounter with Jesus, he's being called to go to Grace Cathedral. And so he's walking up the Knob Hill or whatever it's called to go into Grace Cathedral, which is 100-foot ceiling in San Francisco with its beautiful stained glass windows and murals telling the stories of important people. And he's going to encounter important people, and the important people are going to make a decision about him and his life and his encounter with Jesus. And so it's just such a strange dichotomy or reversal that this man goes from being a beggar on the street to being before the high council in the halls of power. And they ask him, tell us what happened. We're hearing these rumors about this Jesus guy. We don't like this Jesus guy. He's disrupting the normal order of things, and he's challenging our power. Tell us what he did for you. So the man tells his story. He gets to use his voice to tell of his encounter with Jesus. And it's amazing. But then they don't believe him, and so they're arguing back and forth. And again, it's him standing there giving his testimony and other people arguing about whether or not this is true, whether or not he's the man, and all of that. And so finally they decide, well, you're standing here. What do you think about this Jesus guy? And the man born blind says, well, I think he's the Messiah. And they scoff and heap insults on him. And they're just like, what do you know? We don't think he's from God. And I love, this is the best line. The man born blind, he says, now isn't that remarkable? And it's almost like over the 2,000 years of distance since this story, you can feel the sarcasm coming out of this uneducated man born blind, just sarcastically putting these powerful men in their place. And he says, isn't that remarkable? No one's ever heard of a man being born blind and being cured. And here this Jesus guy, he comes and he cures me, who was born blind. And you all, powerful people that you are in the halls of power in this amazing palace place, you all can't see that he is from God. And this fits with the whole theme of John, where the Gospel of John shows that the powerful people who in society's power dynamics and status structure, they're up here and they should have knowledge and power and eyes to see. In the Gospel of John, the story of Jesus shows that they are blind. And the people who are down here in terms of status and power and importance in the world, the blind people, if you will, they're down here. They are the ones that have the eyes to see Jesus. And so I love this story because it totally inverts that power dynamic. And you have this man born blind who, in some ways, according to the ways of the world, has no business being in the halls of power. And yet his encounter with Jesus puts him there, and he sarcastically puts the religious leaders in their place. These leaders with all their degrees and their knowledge and their badges of honor to show how important they are. And yet this blind beggar who now can see just totally shoots down their argument and shows how they are the blind ones. Now, if you were able to read my sermon last week, I talked about Jesus' encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well. And in that day, Jews didn't encounter and interact with Samaritans, especially male Jews and female Samaritans. And then this woman had 5 ex-husbands. So again, she was kind of down here on the social status, especially according to Jews, like Jesus is. She's down here, and yet Jesus encounters her, and it changes her life, and she goes into the village and preaches about Jesus, and people convert and come to believe Jesus as the Messiah. And then this week, we have this uneducated beggar who was born blind, who has this encounter with Jesus, and he goes and preaches Jesus to everyone, and even preaches Jesus in the halls of power. And it's just bold what these seemingly lowly people are able to do after their encounter with Jesus. And 2 weeks ago, the last Sunday we were able to physically gather, we talked about the story of Nicodemus, who was one of those powerful people. And he comes to Jesus at night secretively, and he says, I want to kind of be your follower. And Jesus says, well, you have to be born again. And he's like, this is so confusing. I don't understand. Because he is blind. And so you have the person who is the religious leader who's blind and doesn't preach Jesus. You have the Samaritan woman who preaches Jesus. Now you have the man born blind who has an encounter with Jesus and preaches Jesus to the ends of the earth, including the halls of power. So here we are in Lent, but also with this shelter-in-place order. Someone told me it's almost like we're in Super Lent, which some of us could respond by being like, oh, this is crazy. I'm just going to watch TV all day and wait till things get back to normal. But for some of us, this is a brilliant opportunity to really harness and use our spiritual disciplines. So we can pray more, we can call each other and connect, we can just show ways to love one another. And I'm wondering in this season of Super Lent, if we could maybe find ways to keep our eyes open, so that we are able to see Jesus, so that we're not like those who have eyes but are blind, but we're more like the people down here who do have eyes to see Jesus. And may we, in this Super Lenten period, keep encountering Jesus anew and afresh, so that we'll have eyes to see Jesus and to see Jesus in the lowly, maybe the beggar, the people born blind, the Samaritan woman, and all of God's creatures. Amen.